and we're recording. And I see Lindsay's face, hi, and I see Sam has a cute dog. So, great, I'm excited. I am a professor in the Department of Chemistry, but I also go around and give talks about undergraduate research because of my role at the Undergraduate Research Center. But when those worlds collide and I get to talk to chemistry majors about doing undergraduate research, it's a perfect fit. So let's use the chat really quick. I saw a few of the questions before this, but if you want to use the chat, does anybody here already have a research position and is trying to think about how to stay involved? Or are you looking for a research position? Or are you trying to figure out what you can do in the meantime until you can get a research position? If you want to just in the chat, put in kind of a brief little note of what your status is. Then I can use that to make sure I've got some slides, but just I might skip over a few things and jump to certain things. And if you have no strong opinions, go ahead and, leave it blank. All right. Great, yeah, looking to get involved, advice, and then looking for research, currently looking for research. Have a full-time position as a lab tech, looking to get credit for the work that I do. Great, yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but definitely you can always sign up for Chem 199 units. You can, in some cases, be part of a research program that has stipends associated with it. There are specific internships, but in many cases, the ones on campus are related to credit or a stipend. So yeah, please feel free to share questions during the chat. I'm going to show some slides, and that's going to give some general information. I will see some questions along the way, but then I'll definitely leave time at the end for questions. So hopefully everything in the slides touches on something that everyone is involved with, but not each part might be as directly related. Okay, so let me do my screen share. Start showing some slides. All right, and I do have the chat open, or I will in just a second. All right, so I can see the chat. If you post a question, I may not see it right away, but it is open, so I'll get to that. Great, so this is generally going to be how to get involved with research, but it's also going to be related to how to stay or how to build skills remotely while you're looking. So hopefully if you're here, you already know that it's important. Approximately 50% of students are involved with aspects of research and creative activities. I'm going to kind of quickly go through some of these introductory slides. There's actually lots of ways that you can be involved with research. And one of the things I want to point out is even though you're a chemistry major, you can do research in other departments. Obviously, the technical skills, the communication skills, there's a lot of things, and you can gain critical thinking skills in many areas. We do know that chemistry is awesome. I'm a chemistry professor, but there's other things you can do. And I especially mentioned the fact that some students actually, during the time when they can't access labs, are involved with things like surveys, interviews, data analysis, or archival work that complements some of the work that they could do in a laboratory setting. And just so you know, it can also be very complementary. It can have to do with social justice and policy or design projects or creative arts. The art-science fusion is amazing, right? So there's some really cool ways to bring your love of chemistry and combine it with some other areas also. And so of course, there are many jobs and careers involving research. This is a pretty short list, but if you are a chemistry major, you can build a lot of technical communication skills, critical thinking skills that are applicable in many career and job areas. So I do like to point out that a rec letter is one of the best reasons to do a research position or have research experience, but it's definitely more than a rec letter. So I do want to make sure that obviously if you're here, you know that it's important perhaps, but in case you're still trying to think about the overall impact, you are going to be part of a team. You're going to be part of a research group. You're going to be mentored by faculty and graduate students. And so you're going to get a good recommendation letter because you're going to be working with faculty and graduate students in a way that's very different than you would in a normal classroom setting or even in an advanced lab setting. So there are a lot of benefits, and specifically, the rec letter is one of them. But the other things are you can earn credit towards your degree. You can build technical and transferable skills, critical thinking and analytical skills, lab experience, thinking about the really amazing research that's connected to real world problems. You're going to have to communicate and write about your research, and that's going to help those skills. You're going to simply have networking opportunities that also connect you and help you understand about career possibilities. Many of the research projects going on in the chemistry department involve really amazing, expensive equipment. You're going to learn the software. You're going to be learning a lot about those instrumentations and those skills as well. And then there's definitely other things like presenting at conferences, building a professional network, being competitive for awards in graduate school, getting leadership and team experiences. There's just really a lot of benefits. So I do hope that since you're here, this will strongly encourage you. And many of these, what I want to point out now is that you'll see that while some of these have to do with technical skills, many of these things you can also build these skills even if you're not currently able to be in lab. Right? So this is a really big way to think about the benefits that you can get beyond lab work as well. All right. Okay. And it turns out 93% of employers say that a candidate's demonstrated capacity to think critically, communicate clearly, and solve problems is more important than their major. Being a chemistry major is very important, but you could think about it's what you do with that major. What are the experiences you have while you're doing that major? So how can you hopefully get involved? And when is the best time? So really it's whenever you're ready. If you're a first year student, second year, third year, fourth year, I know there was a student who indicated previously in the advanced questions how to get involved, when you're a junior and a senior. You want to be able to spend at least 6 to 10 hours a week, and you can register for credit to help you put that into your schedule, and of course consult with advisors and peer advisors for planning. You should be in good academic standing. You should feel confident about having some coursework that you have as a good foundation. But in many cases, the courses that you take are not directly going to teach you the skills or that fancy instrumentation that you're going to use in research. So many faculty are very happy for you to get involved as a freshman, a sophomore, or a junior, even before you've taken many of the advanced courses. There's also snack research opportunities, which I like to call them snack because it's usually a 1-quarter experience as a first-year seminar. We have a CURE class that's called Course-Based Undergraduate Research Experience for the first-year seminar program. And a lot of students will get involved in these types of preliminary experiences to build skills, experience, confidence, and then follow up on more long-term positions after that. So the Undergraduate Research Center does have a lot of services and resources online. A lot of our webinars and workshops are available. There's slides. There is a specific one, for example, how to write an email to faculty members. I'll give you some of that advice here, but we also have more details about that. We also have a lot of awards. We have workshops about applying to the Provost Undergraduate Fellowship. We have a travel award, a virtual travel award, so you can get reimbursed for attending a conference, a virtual conference. Other things too about writing abstracts, giving presentations. So even before you get into research, there's resources, and then after you're involved with research, there's also resources. There are some undergraduate myths, and part of what we do is bust those myths. So, there are things people say, I don't have enough time, or research only happens in the lab. There's a lot of different ways to do research, and a lot of different ways to get a research position, a lot of ways to incorporate it in your schedule. So the advisors in the chemistry department and we at the Undergraduate Research Center can help kind of bust these myths so that you feel confident and excited about the research position that you're going to take advantage of. All right, so one of the ways we talk about getting started is keep a running list of what you're interested in. In the chemistry department, are you more interested in computational chemistry? Are you interested in physical chemistry? Are you interested in biological aspects? If you're interested in biological aspects or environmental chemistry, you might not even be looking in the chemistry department. You might be looking in other departments. There's also ways to look at self-assessments to find out some of the strengths you have. The American Chemical Society has a great one that can help you focus your research interest. for the past few years of conferences, all of our undergraduate research conference abstract books are available online. This is an amazing searchable database. So you can see all the faculty in the chemistry department that have sponsored undergraduate students in their lab and the types of projects they've worked on that they have then presented at the Undergraduate Research Center. I'll post that in the chat later on. We've now created a separate page, so it's easier to go just to see all of those abstract books. Also, don't be afraid to ask questions. Asking questions is one of the best ways to learn and get started. This can either be done in a formal interview process, or it can be talking to your TA or your professor at office hours. And especially, don't feel like you already have to be an expert, right? We know that undergraduate students don't know as much about the research area, so it's more about whether you are willing and curious enough to ask questions about that research rather than feeling like you already have to know about it, okay? Also, it's really important to have an updated version of a CV and resume. While you do not have to send a CV or resume, it often makes a very good impression, and sometimes when faculty post positions, they will ask for a copy of that. The Internship and Career Center does have advice specifically related to updating and preparing your CV and resume, and they'll also do drop-in advising related to this. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but if you have any questions specifically related to any of these topics, please go ahead and add them in the chat. So considering what interests you most is important, as I mentioned. Also thinking about, I'm going to try to highlight these action items. So especially during this quarter, while a lot of people are not necessarily on campus or in lab, do think about planning an informational interview. An informational interview can be with another undergraduate student who's already been involved with research, with a graduate student, a TA, or a faculty member. By contacting someone and asking them to do an informational interview, you can learn more about what you're interested in, what brought them to do the research in the field, and see how that inspires you. You can ask them just a little bit more, and it's a way of doing it in a way that doesn't mean you have to say, hey, I want a position, do you have a spot? It can be more about, oh, I'm interviewing or I'm looking at different options. And a lot of that falls under the role of mentoring that graduate students and faculty are eager to do. And then even if they don't have a current opportunity for you to do research in their lab because of the lab restrictions due to COVID, they'll still feel like they're able to share information. Another action item is to attend research group meetings. I don't have a special slide on this, but all faculty have research group meetings. Sometimes they'll have big group meetings as well as subgroup meetings. And this applies also to faculty member in other departments doing scientific research. So most science areas have these research group meetings. You can attend and listen in and learn. One warning is that group meetings tend to be pretty in-depth with the graduate students presenting their current research, so you won't understand all of the details, but that's okay. You're going to be able to see the format and the interactions and just start to see a little bit more of what type of area that group is focusing on and what methods they use. Another action item, of course, is contacting faculty. So in person is better, but of course we know that's not currently an option. You could do this before or after class, even on Zoom. You can do this in office hours, even on Zoom. But at this point in time, and even in general when people are on campus, email is one of the best modes of communication. Do keep in mind that email etiquette is important. Think of this as a professional cover letter or a professional interaction. So write that email with a professional tone and appropriate wording, no typos. And I always say one of the most important things is to express curiosity and motivation. Assuming it's professional, it's good to express curiosity and motivation. And then following up, don't be afraid to follow up. Know that many faculty are extremely busy, also due to elements of the pandemic, juggling family and work. So it's typically not you, just we know that faculty are a little sometimes, just bogged down with a lot of email on certain days. So it's okay to follow up. It shows that you're still interested. And you can do that in a polite and professional way. And I know it was said in one of the panels previously by faculty members, inherently faculty feel a little guilty. And so they're sometimes more likely to respond to the second email, especially if they missed seeing the first email. And we'll come back a little bit more to this, but I do have some very specific advice about what should be included in a professional email. And this is good advice whether you're asking for a research position or following up with someone for a recommendation letter in a class or anything like that. So always use a professor title. Dear Professor Franz, in this case, for example, or Dear Professor Shaw, Dear Professor Tony. Use the professor title. If you're not sure if someone is doctor or professor, it's always best to, accidentally refer to them as a higher title than the opposite. So pretty much always say professor. If you know it's a TA, then you could also, indicate their name or say doctor, just if you're not sure if they're a TA or a lecturer or a postdoc. You should always indicate who you are, like what year, major, just a little bit about if you were in a class with them. That's always important to have that context. You specifically want to indicate why you're interested in their research. And now these points in the email are critical. If you just email someone and say, Dear Professor Franz, I'm a third-year chemistry major and I really want to do research. Do you have a position? Thanks. Right? That's not enough information. You did provide information about being a chemistry major, but you also want to say, why you're interested and demonstrate your curiosity and motivation. Also, there are times when I'll get emails, and all of my colleagues will get emails where it's like one student sending an email to 5 or 10 different faculty members. Faculty are less likely to respond to this type of email because they generally tend to think that that person may or may not actually be interested. It's great that they're considering research, but they just emailed a bunch of people all at the same time. So if you're going to email more than one faculty member, you need to make sure that the email is still very specific to their research program and how it relates to your research interests. It also can be helpful to indicate availability. Do you have time in your schedule? Are you interested in enrolling in Chem 199? Are you interested in, do you have 6 hours a week this quarter, but 10 to 15 hours a week in the future because you want to do an honors thesis or a senior's thesis? And then you can also indicate why you, what skills, what motivation, and you don't have to have skills, but if you have a curiosity and motivation, that goes a long way. And then, of course, you can thank them and have a very professional concluding, like sincerely or best regards. I should say specifically, I'm not, so I've included a few examples. Make sure that you include the last name. So Dear Dr. Jessica, in this case, if the Jessica is the person's first name, that's not a professional approach. It is, however, better than saying, hey. You don't want to say hey or hi to start a professional email. So using something like dear is still an important approach. This person, so if we look at this email, you can think to yourself, how could it be made better? Well, this person, we want to use the proper title and last name to show respect. In this case, we also want to make sure we have good grammar and etiquette and spelling. You also want to provide more details about why their research. So it's really important that you provide specific indication knowing that you're aware of the faculty member's research interests. So a virtual show of hands, even if you don't put your hand up, how many people say, oh, I know exactly where to learn about faculty members' research? You may know that answer, you may not. The good news is that every department has a list of faculty profiles indicating their research interests. And so every faculty member generally has a web page that goes into great detail, but the faculty or the department will also have a very brief page that kind of gives a 1-paragraph highlight of their research interest. So within 5 minutes, you can find some of the initial information. Is that person studying carbohydrates? Are they studying materials? Are they looking at algae biofuels? You can find at least some initial information. And then with an additional 5 to 10 minutes, you can find examples of recent publications. You can look at the people page and see undergrads that they've mentored, or if they've never mentored undergrads, then that might be an indication that they might not have as many undergraduate students in their lab. So the faculty websites and the department pages are a really great way to find this very specific information so that you can reference it in your email. And you can even say something like, oh, I looked at your faculty website and saw that you do research in this area. And this is something that interests me because of the following. Or I had you in a class, I enjoyed the way you discussed this topic, and I'd like to learn more about organic synthesis. So you make sure there's some connection. That's a good advice, not only when emailing faculty for a research position, but in general for networking and for other kind of related professional communications. So here's another one, hello, don't leave it blank. Make sure to address someone so it doesn't look like spam that's being sent to hundreds of people. Make sure to, so make sure to say why a lab, why are you contacting that person? And then here again, make sure to proofread and think of it as a very professional email. And so some of these slides are also shown on our URC website. We have a video that specifically has a short tutorial on writing websites writing emails, and it gives you some good and bad examples to follow up with as well. So here's a more, good example to follow up with that. So actually, this is one I did receive, so I took advantage of kind of copying it. Just says, it was, Dear Professor Franz, I'm a third-year biological sciences. Okay, sorry, no, this is not the one to me. It was someone else, but because I have not taught BIS 102. So here's an example of someone who first had a faculty member in a class, followed up with them, expressed, communicated who they were, why they were interested. And so it just gives a little more detail specifically about their curiosity and their motivation, and then asks if they have a potential position. They've also included a copy of a resume. While not required, it does make a good impression. So it's strongly recommended, but not required. Here's the one that I received. And so this was a student who had taken my 128A class. And so this kind of gives you the idea that really we're talking about a 1 to 2 paragraph email that just basically tells a little bit about your story, your curiosity, your motivation. And these are the types of emails that faculty will pay attention to. They will respond. Unfortunately, they may still respond and say they don't have a position at this moment, but they may add you to a list of people that they want to interview, or they may tell you to follow up next quarter, or if they don't respond and you do follow up with them, then they're more likely to feel guilty for not responding in the first place. And we'll come back and chat a little bit more about emails, but I wanted to be able to provide these specific examples. So do take initiative and be persistent. So you really do want to do, this is kind of a quick summary of everything I had said, make a list of what interests you, look at conference abstracts, read websites, visit the websites of faculty, talk to TAs and graduate students, especially once you think there's a professor you want to work for. Find out if your TA works for them, find out if your TA knows someone who works for them. And of course, do contact professors directly. So there are some also remote action items. So I added this slide, especially during the fall quarter now, for students to think about. So again, I mentioned you can attend research group meetings, you can do informational interviews. We have department seminars almost every Tuesday in the chemistry department and in other departments, environmental toxicology departments. There's various different departmental seminars going on. You can search the literature and write a literature review. So you can, if you have time in your schedule, you can contact a faculty member and tell them that you want to be engaged in initial research, doing literature searching that will help prepare you to do the lab research. You can attend a virtual conference. There's many webinars and tutorials. And I strongly recommend jove.com. I hope you've all heard of this. I really try to get the word out. I guess, Perry, I should really make sure you send this out too. Jove.com is not only a research video website that publishes research in video format, it also has amazing education videos that basically describe techniques and methods that you're using in your advanced classes. This existed prior to the pandemic. It was an amazing resource even when you could be in lab. It's probably more of an amazing resource now that you can't be in lab temporarily. So definitely check this out. It's a really good way to, especially if you're a visual learner, to see examples of things and learn about different levels of research. So if you do nothing else, at least go check that out. And there's some great chemistry there in addition to all other topics as well. Finally, one really cool thing you can do in advance to boost your CV and resume and show interest is to go ahead and do some of your online laboratory safety training in advance. So we have a website on the URC website that gives some online research resources. And this specifically is my summary of laboratory safety training recommendation. So I can provide this information also as a follow-up to Perry, But this website, safetyservices.ucdavis.edu, has all the training, and UC Laboratory Safety Fundamentals is one that's required before you can start lab research. So it was online before, it's still online now. If you do that in advance, you have to actually kind of register at SDPS to get access as a student. But once you do that, you can do this safety training, and then you can have that available so that you've already done it when labs open up, but you can also use it to show faculty how interested and motivated you are that you've already done some of the safety training. Each lab will have its own safety training requirements in addition to the campus safety training, but this is something that is required before you can set foot in a lab. So it is the UC Laboratory Safety Fundamentals. This information is on the URC website. And if it's not yet listed on the chemistry department website, Perry, I can provide this to you, because this is a summary we put together so that students know who they have to contact and which ones. There's also a bunch of other ones, like you can do cryogenic training, you can do laser training. So it actually can be pretty interesting. And I often tell people it's one of the best ways to build up your CV is to list a section on safety training. It doesn't mean you have the expertise, but it shows that you've been proactive and you're aware of safety and you're promoting a culture of safety. And it's online stuff that you can do in advance. Okay, yeah, I see a question that Perry posted. If a professor is not able to offer in a position in their lab, would it be okay to ask if they know of a colleague who is taking in students? And do we know cases where this has happened? I do know a few cases where this has happened. Right now, I'm not sure that's the best question, just because there's so few opportunities to get into a lab. So it'd be better to ask maybe next quarter when labs start to open up more again due to the COVID restrictions. But certainly if one faculty member replies back and says, I don't have any positions, but you look like a great candidate, you could then use it as a networking opportunity to say, oh, thank you very much. Are you aware of any colleagues who are looking, or do you have any recommendations? Yeah, so basically anytime you email or communicate with a faculty member or graduate student, think of it as a networking opportunity. And if they are not able to provide a position, they can still be a valuable network and colleague in the department. Oh, and yeah, here's my Jove testimonial. This is actually, I should point out, the university has a subscription. This is a journal that we subscribe to. So it's accessible through the library. So if you're not logged in, it may show you that you don't have access, but if you're logged in through campus and the VPN at the library, then you'll be able to access all of these resources. So. All right. Great. So I do see a question. I'll go ahead and answer that now too. In the sample, students' years are mostly younger, first to third years. With a senior student, is it too late to apply for research? And that this person will graduate next fall, so not necessarily in the spring. It's never too late. I do tell people if you're graduating in June and you start to look in April, that doesn't give you much time. But if you're just starting your senior year, and especially if you're not even graduating until the following fall and you'll be around for the summer, there's still a lot of great opportunities. You'd want to be more proactive. If you start in your first, second, and third year, you have a little bit more time, but you might have to be more proactive now that it's your senior year. But there's still definitely opportunities. And so what I would say is, especially now, while we have some restrictions within lab, you would want to contact someone and start to do laboratory research, or literature research or data analysis in ways that you can start engaging even before having the opportunity to get into the lab. I'm almost done with my slides. I see some great questions. So I'm going to come back in a second to those. Let me just see if I have many other slides left. I did mention earlier, we have some great programs and awards, and many of you may not be at the point yet to apply for these, but just know that they're there. So when you have a research position, or when you want money for your research to present your research, you can check this out. We do have several programs specifically. Oh, sorry, this information session is out of date. It's been updated. We do have programs specifically for first generation and students with lower financial aid. Chemistry majors are uniquely applicable for our MERPS program, which is sponsored by the Dean's Office, and also the LSENT program sponsored by the NSF. So check out the information on our website about these as well. Oops, sorry. Okay, so finally, we're normally located in the Student Community Center. That's not where we are now, but you can reach us through various virtual online sources. We hope to be a great resource, busting the myth that might prevent you from making the most of a research experience. And I'm happy to answer any questions now. And I'll probably stop sharing just so I can see more faces and see the chat more easily. And then I'm happy to show slides again or give you more specific information. But I'd love to answer more specific questions and help you with as much as possible. So I'm going to stop sharing. All right, and then I can see the questions a little better. Yes, so this will be recorded. I don't know, Perry, if we want to do a few questions that are recorded, and then if people have more specific questions, do some that aren't recorded. It's up to you. I'm happy with either option.
Sure. I mean, if everybody is okay with, just the way you've been doing it, where you're asking the question and answering it, that's totally fine. Because I know sometimes this will be helpful for those that are going to be watching this later, who are not able to attend this seminar. But just to let everybody know, it will be posted on our YouTube channel. So I can send over the links a little bit later in case you don't know where our YouTube channel is. So.
Great. Yeah, and you're welcome to post the questions in the chat, and I'm happy to read them directly from there, but you can also use audio if you prefer. You can just raise your hand.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I did see a great question. Will your GPA affect your opportunity to get into research? So this is a really important question, and I'll probably give a longer answer than you would ever want. The answer is yes and no. In my lab, it doesn't matter. In some faculty's lab, it does matter. One thing to keep in mind is in some cases, there are many people looking for a research position and faculty just don't know how to decide. So sometimes they'll say, I'm only going to consider students who have a 3.5 and above or a 3.2 and above. The first thing I do is to tell people to ignore any GPA requirements. But if you feel like your GPA isn't as competitive as you want, there are ways to get around that. You can be more proactive about looking up the papers, contacting a graduate student, showing how motivated you are to read the literature because you've looked up their papers already. Express your curiosity. One thing that it's really important to keep in mind is I can teach chemistry. I can go in and teach 128 and I can teach you resonance structures and orbitals. I can't teach curiosity. So if you're going to come into my lab and you're a curious person, I can teach you the rest. But if you come in and you're not motivated and you're not curious, then there's nothing I can do, right? So GPA is not a good predictor of success. And in fact, one of the coolest things about research is that research often inspires people to be curious and motivated and do amazing discoveries when classroom wasn't their thing, right? The classroom, you're learning about someone else's research, you're learning about concepts. Classroom is not representative of real world problem solving, teamwork, or anything else, right? So great, it's great that research kind of complements the things you learn in a classroom setting and really brings you the opportunity to do something more interesting, right? So some people, once they're in research, are a superstar, even if their GPA was horrible. And there are so many cases where that exists. So the disadvantage is if you have a low GPA, if there's a reason, explain it. I also knew a student a few years ago, his chemistry GPA was 4.0, but somehow anytime he took a class literally in any other area, he got an F. Like if it was not chemistry, he could not pass the class because he just didn't, it was not his thing, And so it's important to kind of say, oh, look, if you look at my chemistry GPA, it's higher. Or in my first year, the transition was rough, or my father had cancer. Like in many cases, there's a valuable reason why you didn't do as well, but you have an upward trend that shows your potential and you can express your curiosity in other ways. So I never even ask for GPA. When I consider research students, I look for all of those other factors. If there are faculty members that do ask, you should still be encouraged to apply, but just know that you might need to be more proactive about telling them the curiosity and motivation that you bring to the position and why you might be a better candidate. I personally know students that have great GPAs where research isn't their thing. So, GPAs are not necessarily a predictor of success. But some faculty and some research areas, your performance in certain classes might have a correlation to your success in that research. So it just might mean that you might also then think more broadly or find other positions if that's a consideration. And if you do have a good GPA, go ahead and mention it, but know that you will still have to express other, strengths that you have, because some people get good GPAs because they're necessarily not good at teamwork, right? They do really well sitting in their room studying, but they don't necessarily communicate effectively. So just know that a good GPA, you may still have to build skills in other areas also. Okay, I think a bunch of questions came in. I'm trying to see which ones Perry answered and which ones I should answer. Okay, so yeah, here's a general question about how to do research during the pandemic and everything is online. So I had a few comments about that. For certain things, you can't do as much research. Even the graduate students are not in lab right now and can't do as much research. So it's just a common and unfortunate situation. The undergraduate students in my lab right now are doing data analysis. In some cases, it's analysis of existing data that we've already analyzed, so they get to practice and build their skills. But it means that then when they go in the lab and check their own data, collect their own data, they now are more prepared and know how to do that data analysis. I've got other students doing literature reviews. Searching the literature is actually an important skill. And if, for example, if we're looking for new chiral imidazole catalysts, you can go to Google, you can go to SciFinder, you can learn skills about how to use Google Scholar and how to use SciFinder to find chiral imidazole catalysts and prepare a list of literature reviews or literature articles. There are other labs that actually have large data components, archival components, data analysis, computational chemistry. So some students are actually still doing almost the same research that they would have done. So the Donadio lab, the Tentolo lab, many of those research areas are not at all changed. One of the graduate students in my lab has started doing docking and modeling studies for a bioactive compound. Before she was synthesizing the molecules, but now she's focusing on some of the molecular modeling aspects of it. So there are some limitations, but there are still a lot of opportunities. And as an undergraduate student, you can still build skills that will help you hit the ground running faster once you are able to get into lab. So if you kind of think about it, this is the warm up and stretching phase. And then when the labs open up again, you're ready to go, right? You wouldn't want to have the labs open up and then do your online safety training, because you can do your online safety training now, right? Okay, and apologies if I miss a question. You might just have to repost it again at the bottom. Yeah, so the maximum number of research units that can be counted as credit towards a degree, I'll let Perry answer that one. Another student, okay, this person is graduating next year and has contacted multiple professors with no avail. I sent all the emails in the summer, and I'm wondering if maybe I solicited during an inappropriate time, and if so, what dates would be best to start approaching professors? Mainly looking for research opportunities to build some webs, especially for the required letters of recommendation to apply to graduate school. So if you sent them in the summer and you only sent them once, it's okay to send a follow-up, absolutely. I try my best to reply to all emails, especially students, but sometimes if I don't recognize the name or the subject is not what I expected, and I'm getting a bunch of emails from, political campaigns or other spam emails, sometimes things, sift through the cracks. So it's fine to send a follow-up email. During the summer was also this weird time warp of just, the pandemic. So don't feel bad about sending a follow-up email. And it's fine to say, oh, I'm sending a follow-up email. I'm still very interested in learning about research opportunities in your group. And so you still want to be polite about it, but you want to be able to have that. Now, if it's someone you've already taken a class with, that can also be helpful, because then in your email you can say, oh, I sent you an email over the summer and I previously took your class. Also, especially if you're looking to build a network associated with recommendation letters, if you've already had a class with someone and then continue to do research with them, that will help you have a stronger recommendation letter, because they will be able to comment on your class performance as well as your research performance. You can also make that offer to do a literature search, or tell them that you're interested enough to get involved, that you'd like to be able to build that connection now. If you are applying to graduate school in the next month, as in this fall, it will be challenging to build that connection if you haven't already had them in a class. So I would focus on contacting faculty you've already had in a class, tell them you're interested in writing you're interested in asking for a recommendation letter, but you'd also like to learn more about research opportunities, doing literature reviews, attending research group meetings, and showing signs of being proactive. So what do professors look for in student CVs and resumes? So that's a great question because you want to make sure you include that information in your CV and resume. So some of this information will be included in your email, but it's good to indicate if you've taken advanced classes. For example, in my case, if you've taken any of the organic series, especially if you've taken 128, but 118 is also good. If you've taken 131, 231A, any of the organic courses, just give me a sense of what your background knowledge is. If you've taken 129, you've had more research experience in the lab than compared to the labs for 118. So any of the advanced labs or labs can be worth mentioning. It's also good to indicate if you've been in a club, if you have a leadership position. Also, I find it very valuable, and I know some of my colleagues do also, for students that have been involved with sports. Doing research can be very similar to being on a sports team. There's an expectation of time commitment. You show up for practices, you contribute to a team, you're committed, you have the expectation of going there and spending a certain number of hours per week. And so mentioning your involvement on a sports team can also be actually very valuable. If you have had any internships, if you've been specifically building any skills related to coding or computational chemistry or software, those can also be mentioned. But I would say one of the main things we're looking for is that if a student has a CV or resume, it means they're approaching this from a very professional way and they're taking it very seriously. And it shows that you're, trying to be on track for graduate schools, internships, and other jobs as well. So even if there's not a lot of stuff on your CV, it shows that you're starting that step on a professional pathway. And let me know if that answers that question. We can talk a little bit more if you have a specific question about something you're wondering about putting on. Okay, one question here is undergraduate research looked at by graduate schools and how important is it? All right, that's a really great question. So when you go to graduate school, whether it's a master's or a PhD program, but especially for a PhD program, it's pretty much all about research, right? You typically have a 4 to 5 year PhD process. 1 year is classes with a little bit of research mixed in, and then the rest of the 3 to 4 years is only research. So the best predictor of success in graduate school is your involvement in undergraduate research. So that means the weight is, quite highly related to the recommendation letter you get from a research advisor and your involvement with research. Okay. Now, you can get into graduate school without research experience, but you would want to then make sure to emphasize opportunities to be engaged with advanced labs or other specific things that show success related to graduate school. GPA is sometimes a factor, but not always, because research is a better predictor of success. GRE is definitely not a significant factor, and most programs, especially this year, are not requiring the GRE, and many, due to equity issues, are also getting rid of that requirement altogether in the future. But some places will still look at it, so it's important to be aware. But as more and more programs get rid of the GRE requirement, then it's just going to kind of be this landslide where everyone does that. So having research is great, though. If you feel like your GPA isn't as high, research helps compensate and overcome that, because again, research is a greater predictor of success, and it allows you to have a much stronger recommendation letter, right? And that recommendation letter is a really great way for a graduate program or an industry position to know your potential. Let's see. All right, how long should we wait until you send a follow-up email? You don't want to seem impatient or rushing. Well, that's very polite of you. I would say it depends on, I guess, what your schedule is and potentially when you sent that email. I would say, if you sent one, 24 hours later, don't send another one being like, you didn't respond yet. 1 week is a really good time. Maybe if one time you send it on Monday, maybe Monday's a really busy day. Next time, send it the following week on a Tuesday. I would say 1 to 2 weeks is a reasonable amount of time. 2 weeks later, and someone might not have, might not remember. And so that can be helpful, but there's not really any one specific thing. I would say as long as you wait maybe at least 3 days, that's a reasonable time frame. Yeah, I sometimes respond very quickly so I don't forget, but then I worry that then students will get it in their head that faculty respond within an hour, and that's usually not always the case. I would say, though, that there's also a consideration that sometimes faculty are on sabbatical. Sometimes they have a heavy teaching load. They're teaching 2 classes in one quarter and no classes the next quarter. And so in some cases, if you don't hear back, it may be because that quarter was particularly insane. I mean, in this case, if you've got someone who's teaching 2 classes, maybe they have 2 kids at home, no childcare because of the pandemic, it might just be that this quarter they can't respond to emails. But next quarter, maybe they're not teaching because they already taught their 2 classes. And so in some cases, the next quarter or during a break might give you a better response. And I say this not because I want you to think that faculty don't care or aren't available, just that they're human and there are times when they might have more or less time available. But you should never feel bad sending a follow-up email. All right, and question here, how should I start the research topic in my professor or TA's office hours? Yeah, so first of all, graduate students and faculty love to talk about their research. We love teaching, but we really love our research. And so if you ask about someone's research, they're usually going to be really excited about that, okay? And so there are very simple ways that you can ask an open-ended question that will allow that faculty member to just kind of start giving you information. So you can potentially peek at their website in advance, and you could say, if it's during office hours, it also depends if there's like 10 other people there for office hours or not. So if there's a bunch of other people, you might say, oh, I'm very interested to ask you about your research. Can I ask you about that at the end of office hours? Or can I set up another meeting with you? So that's one way if there's a bunch of people there. If there aren't a bunch of people there, after you've asked a question about the class, you might say, oh, I also saw on your website that you do research related to this topic. I'd be interested to know more about that and if you ever have undergraduate students involved in your research project. So you can ask kind of like open-ended questions. And you can also just ask them in general, what is your, what are your opinions about the importance of undergraduate research, or making a statement like, I'm excited to get involved with undergraduate research. Do you have any advice for me? Or I'm excited to get involved with undergraduate research. And based on what I saw on your website, you have some research that would interest me. Can you tell me more about the research in your lab? Right, so you can kind of ask those very general questions. You don't have to say, in your publication from 2017, I saw that you received, you saw this exact result. You don't worry about feeling like it's a test. You have to prove to them that you read their papers. You can ask a very open-ended general question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the same thing would apply to a graduate student. Or a TA, you can just say, oh, hey, what is your research or your thesis project? Or I'd be interested to hearing about your research. Do you have time to tell me about it, right?
I would say talking to a graduate student too is a really good non-intimidating way to kind of approach about seeing, what research they're doing and who they're working with. And, because I know sometimes for some students, especially ones that are introverted or very shy, I mean, it's, going directly to a faculty person can be a little like scary. But talking to a graduate student, it can be a little bit more, casual about things. So more comfortable.
Yeah, and also I mentioned earlier, talking to other undergraduate students involved with research, especially if you're a sophomore and a junior or a senior, talking to Chem Club members, peer advisors, many of the peer advisors are involved with research. So definitely feel comfortable talking to undergrads and graduate students. And also, if you go to talk to a faculty member and say, oh, I was talking to one of your graduate students about research, right? You can also use that as a lead-in. Or I saw you at the panel during Undergraduate Research Week. You can kind of use those like lead-ins to show that you're motivated and interested in the area. I know some faculty, some of my colleagues, are a little scary to me too. I shouldn't be saying that because it's recorded, but my point is, you don't have to feel super comfortable, and not all faculty are as approachable, and that's okay. Everybody's different. So it's okay to talk to graduate students. And in fact, some faculty don't interview undergrads. They actually wait until their graduate student comes to them and says, oh, one of my students in my class was really curious and interested. And I can tell you, I've never had a TA come to me, or my graduate student who's a TA come to me and say, oh, this student's getting the best grade in the class, they should be in our lab. They usually come to me and say, this student is asking the most questions or showing the most interest. This student seems really motivated. This student seems really curious. So those are kind of the things that people are looking for. And, in many cases, people don't ask your GPA. They don't look at your grade. It's really more of, are you curious and engaged and going to be part of a team that's excited to discover something? So in many cases, you can talk to the graduate student, and the graduate student will kind of be the liaison or be the person that recommends you get a position in the lab. And so you don't even have to approach the faculty member if that's sometimes the situation, right? Okay. I always heard my TA talk about her lab. I want to chat with her about it, but I don't know where to start. Okay, yeah, good. So yeah, I mean, you think about it, like if a faculty member or a TA is teaching, they want to be doing that because they want to help students, but they are really more excited about their research. Yeah, so being able to ask those questions can be really useful. And also, just so you know, I always hear from my graduate students as TAs that a lot of students don't come to office hours, right? And so take advantage of office hours. I know some students feel intimidated by it or feel like you have to go if you have a question about the class. Definitely stop by and ask questions about research. And even if that TA is not someone who's in a lab you want to work with, you can still ask for their advice or ask them if they know a graduate student in another group, right? It's all part of like a networking process.
While we have some time, Dr. Franz, can you talk about REUs and why a person will want to pursue that, or when's a good time to do that?
Yeah, so, well, REU just stands for Research Experience for Undergraduates. And this is generally, if you have an NSF REU program, it's funded money to a department. You can also, faculty can submit a request for an REU supplement. So for example, I can receive additional funding to support or pay an undergraduate student a summer stipend to work in my lab. The idea of an REU program is typically where you go to another campus to be involved with a research experience. The true intention of an REU program is for students from very small schools to have the chance to go to a bigger university. So if you're at UC Davis and you want to go to UC Santa Barbara, that's not the exact intention, but it can still be applicable if that university has a significant area of research that you're excited about and you want to convey that. So there are these summer internships. We have summer programs on our own campus through NSF LSAMP and MERPS. We also have our own REU program that this year was virtual, and next year we'll keep our fingers crossed, but it's been renewed for another 3 years. And as part of those programs, we do also include students from our own department, often transfer students, because we say that they've been, come from a community college and now they're just arriving or have, more recently arrived at UC Davis. But you can go to the NSF website and look at all of the REU programs across the country. And especially if there's a university or department that you're interested in applying to for graduate school, going there to be a part of an NSF REU program for the summer is a great opportunity specifically to network and build contacts in that department.
Thank you for saying that, because what that came up in our undergraduate student research panel, And a lot of them weren't able to really answer that question because a lot of them were not involved in RUs. In fact, some of them didn't even know what an RU was. So it was a little like head scratcher for me. It's like, why would you not know that? So.
Well, you wouldn't know it if you're at a big university that generally has research opportunities, because hopefully you're going to take advantage of a research opportunity at your own institution, so you can do it during the academic year and during the summer. So typically an RU program is for universities where students don't have research opportunities during the academic year, and the only way for them to experience that is to go to a larger institution during the summer. So our program at UC Davis typically brings in students from other institutions, but we also have the opportunity to include a small number of students from our own institution. And then during this past year, we made it a more transfer focused program just because it was virtual anyway. So yeah, there's some different interpretations, but generally you're less likely to know if you're at an institution that has research opportunities. And we do know some students though, for example, if you really wanted to learn more about oceanography or materials chemistry, some RIU programs are very focused on that. Some RIU programs used to go to Costa Rica or Thailand. So their selling point was that it was an international program. And then it was really to build international connections, and it didn't matter what type of institution you were at, right?
So we'll take our last question here from Lindsay. She's asking about undergraduate research and senior thesis. Is it independent of each other or one and the same?
Yeah, so it's generally you have a research position, and then you choose to do a senior thesis related to that research, or you decide in your senior year that you're going to do research, and it's the research and the thesis kind of together. It's very rare that you would have a research position in one lab and then a second research position in another lab that you also do a senior thesis. The senior thesis generally means that you'll be spending more time. So we simply indicate kind of like a 6 to 10 hour time expectation per week for research. But hopefully if you've had a chance to get involved with research a little bit before, by the time you get to your senior thesis time, you want to spend 10 to 15 hours a week, right? So you're really almost as productive or more productive than some of the graduate students, right? Yeah, so generally your senior thesis is written about your undergraduate research. You can also do a senior thesis that is independent of research. For example, currently during COVID, there are ways to write a thesis and it would be a little less lab research based, and it might be more to do with a literature review or a modeling study. So it would be research, but a slightly different flavor of research.
And Lindsay, if you want to talk a little bit more about the technical aspects in terms of registering and all that kind of stuff, feel free to drop by during my open office hours, or you can always make an appointment and I can go through all the details and the protocol for that. So, yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Franz, for taking the time and co-hosting this info session with us to share a little bit about the Undergraduate Research Center and its services and everything to our undergraduate students. Again, just to remind everybody, I will be posting this recording on our YouTube channel, and if I find a good spot, I'll put it on our website as well. So that way, there's 2 places where you can access this recording and everything in case you want to kind of play back and listen and watch and take more notes and everything. Also, if Dr. Franz is okay, if they do have other follow-up questions, could they email you directly?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to mention, as a chemistry event, as chemistry majors, because I am both the chemistry professor and the faculty director of the Undergraduate Research Center, I am doubly passionate about supporting chemistry undergraduate students in research. So please feel free to contact me. If it happens to come at a crazy time and I don't reply to your email, that means I didn't see it. So feel free to send a follow-up email too and just say, hi, following up with a question again. Or you can kind of put in the subject heading, like, chemistry major undergraduate research question, something that helps me know who's sending the email. But yeah, I try to have undergraduate students in my lab, but I don't have enough space for everyone. I know not everyone is interested in my area of research, but I can try to make recommendations, connect you with resources, remind you about Jove and literature searches and safety training. But please feel free to contact me. As a chemistry major, I am part of your network, so take advantage of it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And again, thank you, Dr. Franz, for doing this with us and everything. I appreciate everything.
Yeah, great to see you.